here. Subscribe so you never miss an upload.
Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor DM, and this channel is about the best independent role-playing games. But before we begin, this episode is sponsored by Blood and Doom RPG. Most of my viewers know I don't generally promote Kickstarters, but Blood and Doom just blew me away. It is everything that gets me excited. A cool map, awesome character sheets, atmospheric music. It has its own orchestral score, and more than 500 pages of playable content from the core rulebooks, free to download when you try out the game. The game features a D10 dice pool mechanic with setbacks when things go horribly wrong, and momentum, which you can spend in order to do cool things like chop off an opponent's arm when you roll really well. And there's no initiative order. Everyone just takes one turn per round in any order that seems natural. Absolute genius. The setting is the grimdark world of Aether, where 12 evil cults worship the alien heralds of doom. The writing and illustration are top-notch, and the rules strike a balance between fast-paced action and more strategic elements. So check out the Kickstarter and the awesome trailer in the link provided in the description below. I've gotten a lot of questions about my favorite games that are like D&D but not D&D, and that's what this episode is about. I'm going to be counting down my top 10 elevator pitches for games that are similar to the world's most popular role-playing game. I'm going to be counting them down from 10 to 1, and it's not based on my preferences, it's based on how close the game is to D&D. A couple of caveats: I didn't include Pathfinder. That's the game that is most like 5e, but I wanted to highlight independent companies that are a lot smaller than Paizo. I also didn't include games like Mörkborg or Shadow of the Demon Lord, which have the DNA of D&D, but they only have 4 statistics instead of the traditional D&D statistics of strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma, hit points, and armor class. And with that in mind, let's count them down. And number 10 is Knave. Knave is Ben Milton of Questing Beasts micro game. It boils D&D down to just 7 lean pages. These include GM's notes on why he made certain design decisions. The ability score generation is really cool. You roll 2d6 for each ability score and take the lower number as a bonus. That means every character gets at least +1 in every ability. And that's because Knave has no classes. Everyone is a knave, a dungeon exploring adventurer. Anyone can use any weapon or wear any armor, anyone can pick a lock, and anyone can cast spells. But you have to find them in spellbooks, which work like scrolls. The game comes with 100 original spells, hit points, and armor class called Defense aligned to old school modules, which means you can play any OSR modules with Knave. Knave is the ultimate system if you don't want to be pigeonholed into a class, or you don't want to worry because you're going in a crypt but the cleric player didn't show up. And Knave's second edition is kickstarting any day. There are already 4,000 people watching, so check that out on Kickstarter. Number 9, Deathbringer. Yes, of course I included my own game. Art and layout by Runehammer, and these rules fold out like a menu. You got the 6 traditional ability scores, but only the bonuses are used like in Knave. There are no skills, no feats. Instead, you get a handful of Deathbringer dice. D6s that you can roll to add to a D20 roll, block D6 damage, or inflict an additional D6 damage. And when you level up, you get more. And this creates a flexible pool of skills. So this way, anyone can take a chair leg and jam it through someone's eye. Anyone can swing from a chandelier. Anyone could jump over that chasm or take out that guard in one shot just when they need to do it. Wizards are really cool. There are no spell slots. You roll to cast. If you roll a 20, you get extra effect. If you roll a 1, you have to roll on a critical failure chart. And something terrible could happen, like your hair falls out, or you lose a level, or you just explode. And you can cast unlimited spells, you just have to tattoo them on your body, making Wizards a living spellbook and also targets for other wizards who want to take their skin. It's a pretty grimdark game. 8, the Black Hack. Black Hack is a stripped-down version of basic D&D with a simple roll-under mechanic. You roll under your ability score on a 20-sided die, which eliminates players asking, what do I have to roll again, and slowing down your game. You got the basic classes, fighter, wizard, cleric, thief, but they're all presented on a single page, and fighters are awesome. They get 1 attack per level, so by 5th level they're a whirlwind of death with 5 attacks, and it is a masterpiece of efficiency. They include the most commonly cast cleric and magic user spells with simple one-line descriptions on facing pages, and they have a great Game Master section with advice on how to create dungeons, towns, and hex crawls. Highly recommended. 7. Index Card RPG from Runehammer Games. Index Card RPG uses 6 traditional stats, but instead of those useless 3d18 ability scores, you assign 6 build points between them. There are several classes to choose from. Wizards roll to cast, always fun. Characters have 10 hit points and they pretty much stay that way, so they never become invincible battle tanks. Index Card also features the best GM section I've ever read, with formulas for building encounters, tips on pacing and timing, and the best monster stat blocks I've ever seen. Each heart is worth 10 hit points, and monsters have a single bonus. So a 3-heart monster with a +3 tentacle has 30 hit points, +3 to hit, damage, and its saving throws. Simple. There are also rules for other genres like sci-fi and superheroes, and I can't forget the Index Card's hundreds of drawings you can use to make portable dungeons and encounters. This game is fantastic. 6 is Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. This game was given to me by my trademark attorney, Nate, who loves it. He's been after me to cover this game for the longest time, and it is a lot of fun. Immediately accessible to anyone who has ever played D&D, Hyperborea is AD&D meets Savage Sword of Conan. It looks like AD&D, it feels like AD&D, right down to the wonky charts where an 18 strength is +2 to hit but +3 to damage. The art is dark with lots of fighting and beheadings. There are loads of fighter and thief subclasses, from berserkers to barbarians to scouts and assassins. No elves and dwarves, that's Tolkien D&D. Everyone is human, and races include Amazons, Atlanteans, Celts, Vikings, and more. There are a few concessions to D&D tropes. You can play a wizard, and the traditional spells like Fireball are included, even though in Robert Howard's stories the wizards are always the bad guys. There's less magic and fewer magic items, and great rules for mass combat, which is in keeping with the Conan genre. Conan's name is not mentioned, by the way, for trademark reasons, but his spirit is here on every page. So if, like Conan, you want what is best in life, Hyperborea is your game. 5. Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Lamentations is really close to my beloved BX D&D, and it's the game that proved to me that you could take that basic D&D framework and make a game that is not for kids. By the way, do not leave this book around for your kids to find, because the artwork is definitely a hard R. You got death at 0 hit points, clerics are depicted as witch-hunting lunatics, and the more fantastic spells, like anything that could bring you back to life, has been excluded. It has a great DM section on how to run weird fiction based on Clark Ashton Smith, Robert Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft. And it has produced some of the finest modules I have ever read, including No Salvation for Witches and Better Than Any Man. And if you want to play those adventures without purchasing the core system, that's totally cool, because they are compatible with any BX Retro clone. Number 4, Dungeon Crawl Classics by Goodman Games. With great art by classic TSR illustrators like Jim Rosloff, Jim Holloway, Errol Otis, Dungeon Crawl Classics is Gonzo BX D&D. It uses additional weird dice. Elves and dwarfs are classes. Each class has its own critical hit chart and quirky features. Wizards roll to cast on a natural 1. Spells can go haywire, and each spell has its own critical failure chart. There's also Spell Burn, a cool concept where you can burn other ability scores to make a failed spell check succeed. Fighters have Mighty Deeds of Strength, which allow them to make up their own stunts and special moves, elegantly replacing the need for feats. And it is brutal. Death at 0 hit points. Few characters are going to make it past 5th level. Characters start at 0 level, so you can actually die before even reaching 1st level. The many charts make this book thick and very flippy, but it contains 2 ribbons, so you can mark your favorite pages. And I love the art. My son was about 12 when he read it, and it was like his favorite book. And full disclosure, I love Goodman Games. I'm going to be running a game in the Goodman Games van this upcoming Gen Con in 2023, so be on the lookout for that. Number 3 is Castles and Crusades by Troll Lord Games. I get hit up all the time in the comments from people saying, "Hey, Professor, when are you going to talk about Castles and Crusades?" Well, I have nothing but love for this game and Troll Lord Games, and this is how I would describe Castles and Crusades. D&D was invented by 2 geniuses, Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, and they had a falling out in the 70s that led to the game being split into 2 branches. You had basic D&D and advanced D&D. But what if they had never had that falling out? What if they remained friends and developed a second edition of D&D together? It would be Castles and Crusades. Castles and Crusades takes BX ideas like uniform ability scores, like everything gets +1, +2, +3, and mashes it up with AD&D. So you get a book that really looks like the original first edition AD&D Player's Handbook mixed with the original and the best Unearthed Arcana. There are minor superficial changes like the knight replaces the cavalier and there are rogues instead of thieves, but like in AD&D, each class has its own XP chart. Rogues need fewer XP because they got killed more often. You get the traditional races and ability score bumps, like dwarfs get +1 to Constitution, -1 to Dexterity. The classic spells are all here. You got your Magic Missile, Fireball. Minor concessions include wizards having 5 spells to start instead of just 1, which I think is a good thing. And they remove the level limitations on elves and dwarfs, which most players prefer. Castles and Crusades is the greatest hits of D&D, and if that's what you're looking for, or if you're looking to get back into the game after an extended absence, but you lost all your old first edition monster manuals and Dungeon Master's Guide, Castles and Crusades is the version of D&D for you. Number 2, Old School Essentials by Necrotic Gnome. No one loves basic D&D more than me, but these books are collector's items, and it's a lot less expensive to simply buy Old School Essentials from Necrotic Gnome. A lot of people have asked, like, what makes this the best retro clone? And to me, it's all about presentation. The writing is so crisp and clear, and the binding is so great. They use the end pages. It's just a fantastic product. The rules are simple. 7 classes. Dwarfs and elves and halflings are classes. There are strict level limitations. And it's a completely faithful adaptation except for one concession to modern gaming, which is Ascending Armor class. They do include the charts if you want to go the THAC0 route, but why you would want to do math twice, I have no idea. Like, I love basic D&D, but I think THAC0 is just an 80s artifact, like leg warmers or headbands. Old School Essentials does not seek to innovate the game. It seeks to curate the game, presenting the game that I first learned to play with 40 years ago. And it does that exceptionally well with high production values and great binding. Highly recommended. Which brings us to number 1, but first, my honorable mention, 5 Torches Deep. I love this game. It's a streamlined, grimdark version of 5e. It's super easy and accessible to anyone who's ever played that game, but it's a little bit tougher with rolling to cast instead of spell slots. It killed me to cut this list down to just 10 choices, and 5 Torches Deep, you can't go wrong. It's terrific. But now, for number 1, Shadowdark by Arcane Library. If Castles and Crusades is AD&D and OSE is basic D&D, Shadowdark is basic D&D with 5e mechanics. It's a cousin of sort to DCC. It's got a similar grimdark feel without all the weird dice and charts. You got the traditional classes, warrior, thief, wizard, priest. Ancestries include human, dwarf, elf, goblin, half-orc, halfling. When you level up, you roll 2d6 for a random improvement. Like warriors might gain an additional weapon mastery or +2 to any stat. Wizards roll to cast, so do priests, so a natural 1 might mean your spell goes haywire or the cleric's deity gets angry and refuses to perform any new miracles until the cleric does penance. There are also innovative concepts like the Decider die. Exploration is measured in real time with torches burning at a rate of 1 per hour. And like old school games, it's very GM-centric. It says point blank, the only rule is you make the rules. And the random encounter charts are unparalleled. Hazards, bosses, settlement names, random tavern generators, random city generators. The charts alone make this game worth it. And people have asked me, what makes this game so good? What makes it different? It is the writing. It is so crisp, clean, and efficient. You don't have to turn pages. Everything is so clearly laid out and so easy to find what you need. From presentation to binding to theme to tone, Shadowdark just kills it on every level. But that's what I think. What do you think? Are there any games I might have missed? Include those in the comments below. Also below you'll find links to Dungeon Craft on Facebook and Patreon, and you can get my game Deathbringer at DriveThruRPG. But all of these games and all of these creators are worth it. I love them all, and creators keep creating. And I want you to know that here at Dungeon Craft, we always have your back. I'll see you soon. May all your rolls be 20s.
Deathbringer again. Time for a fashion face-off. Who wore it better? Travolta or me? Sound off in the comments below. Get my t-shirt and watch more Dungeon Craft.